This is a response to Matt Colville's last video on Overland travel, which I think is taken down now. I didn't see it myself. I only listened to it. There might be some issues with how it looked. I don't know any of that. I only heard the content, and I thought that was only of so-so quality. Basically, his advice was, hey, don't do it, which is fair advice. There's a lot of people who don't want to do overland travel, who just hand wave it over. I think the advice in the Dungeons Master's Guide is kind of along those same lines. But when people go and ask, hey, how do you do this thing? They're asking because they want to do it. They don't want to hear, that's not for me. So, his other advice is, well, if you're going to do it, go ahead and do a skills challenge. Which, okay, I've done skill challenges myself for doing overland travel. My characters had to go over like 100 miles of the Underdark in order to get from destination A to destination B, and we did that with just a skills challenge. It only took 5 minutes at the table. But I felt okay because they were like level 13, level 14 at the time. And so, that sort of movement is kind of trivial to them. There are bigger challenges at play. We separate characters into different tiers for reasons, and part of low tier play is this feeling that, hey, the wilderness is dangerous. Getting from point A to point B is an adventure in and of itself. And I think taking overland travel seriously really honors that tradition. I think it's important, and I think it could really help your game. A lot of people do ask, how do you make overland travel interesting? It comes up, and I think there's a couple of reasons why this is an issue. One reason is if you look in the player's handbook. So if you look in your player's handbook, okay, let's turn in our hymnals to chapter 7, page 182. This is the third printing of the player's handbook. So the rules there are kind of disjointed. I mean, they work just fine. They parse perfectly fine with the rest of 5th edition rules, but they're all sort of standalone micro rules. I believe, my understanding is that those particular parts of the rules were outsourced. They were not written in-house by wizards. They got picked up by Cobalt Press and the Green Ronin people to write their exploration rules, which is why they don't fit well with the rest of what happens in the player's handbook. Same thing with the Dungeon Master's Guide. There are rules in there, but it's basically, hey, here's how you get lost, or here's how you find food. So it's something that's not really fleshed out all the way. Now, there are lots of parts of 5th edition that aren't fleshed out, and most of that's to give the Dungeon Master freedom, to make things loose and narratively flow. But at the same time, you need to provide good tools for the DM to work in these situations, and I think 5th edition kind of falls behind on that. Another reason why I think overland travel is an issue that keeps coming up, people don't really know how to handle it, is because of the ranger. So a lot of people would just hand wave overland travel in the low levels, which, again, is perfectly fine. But if they have a ranger in the party, they want to feel like, hey, this character is important. This player is doing something really useful for the team. But if you look at the ranger's favorite terrain abilities, if the ranger is in the wilds, if the ranger is in their favorite terrains, they're basically just a bunch of I win buttons. You cannot become lost. You always find food. All these situations where instead of making the ranger feel like he's succeeding at a task or overcoming a challenge, it's just check, 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 done, done, done. Alternatively, the DM can put the ranger in a terrain that's not their favorite terrain, in a different landscape. But then the ranger doesn't really have any special abilities. All of their wilderness survival stuff is sort of geared towards being in their favorite terrain. So it's really a no-win situation. The real reason why overland travel is so hard, or not really handled well, a lot of DMs are having trouble with it at their tables, is because they just get in this mode. They just have this lather, rinse, repeat of how to do overland travel, where you camp, roll for a random encounter, nothing. Camp, roll for a random encounter, nothing. Fight, roll for a random encounter, and it's just 6 hobgoblins randomly on the woods. So they're not really taking full advantage of what overland travel can be. So I'm going to show you 3 ways that I really make overland travel interesting. And then we're going to talk about some other stuff that other DMs are doing on the internet, and I'm going to give you my own personal rules for how to make this run. Okay, so let's talk about the reasons why you should not skip overland travel and why you should keep it in your game. First of all, because you as the DM, you chose a setting. You chose for your adventure to take place in a certain landscape, whether it be the mountains or the forests, the deserts, the Arctic tundra. You chose the setting, and so you need to showcase it. I mean, if you went through the trouble of choosing that location and you never do anything with it, then why did you choose it to begin with? So you have to do something to build your world, and even more than that, you have to set ambiance. You have to make it feel like you're really living in this environment. That's a really integral part of this role-playing experience, is everyone believing you have the shared memory of the same place. And building out your environment is how you're going to do that. The other reason why you should do overland travel is because it gives you a bit of time. So, when your characters are in a town or in at an inn, they're talking to nobles or at a tavern, they're always on a mission. When they're at the dungeon, there's always some other pressure. They have to get to the princess, they have to stop the ritual. But when you're overland travel, you know that you guys are just going from point A to point B, and so that can give you an opportunity to insert some role play. Your characters are not under any immediate pressure, and so it gives you an opportunity to let them talk about their backgrounds, talk about their experience, talk about gives the players the chance to express how their characters might be thinking or feeling about the situation that they're in. Also, for you as a DM, if you have an NPC traveling with them, it's a good opportunity for you to do some exposition. Imagine you can paint a scene where all the characters are sitting around a campfire at night, and the NPC is telling a legend about the world that has important implications for your plot later on. This is your opportunity to put that in a place where it feels natural. Another reason why you should do overland travel is because by the time you get to 10th level and earn those spells like Teleportation Circle, Tree Stride, you can appreciate how special they are because you started out walking from town to town just like everybody else. When you're doing overland travel, you don't just want to have random encounters. There should be really 3 types of encounters that you're doing: terrain-based encounters, environmental encounters, and then discovery encounters. Terrain-based encounters. If you look on forums on Reddit or on EN World, a common question that DMs ask is, hey, how do I make my combats more interesting? And the number one reply is usually use terrain. What I think people are meaning is they want to make your combats feel like Final Fantasy Tactics or XCOM, both great games. So, using terrain as part of your overland travel encounter is a really great opportunity to do this. You're not limited by space like you are in a dungeon. You can have big, deep chasms or tall trees, and it makes sense. It's also an opportunity for you to use different types of terrain, like ice or lava, to really sort of flesh out your battles. Imagine you can have a swamp troll walking through the marsh. He can move fast through it, but your players are marred down, and there's swamp gas puffing off that is poisonous to the players. Or imagine that their players are walking through the rainforest, and all of a sudden, phew, 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 they're ambushed by elven archers high up in the treetops. Or imagine if they're running away from an orc horde in the mountains, crossing a narrow bridge, and all of a sudden on the other side, a gigantic rock troll appears, hurling boulders at them. So using terrain really not only reinforces the setting that you're placing your adventure in, but it also gives you an opportunity to create cool tactical encounters that are thematically appropriate. Moreover, when you're having combat encounters in overland travel, you're not limited necessarily to size like you are in a dungeon. You don't have to imagine everything being in 30-foot rooms or 60-foot rooms. You can do things that are 100 feet away, 300 feet away. Some of these ribbon abilities that character classes have, like the barbarian wolf totem you can see a mile away, they're not going to get an opportunity to really use those features unless you have some combat encounters outdoors. The second type of encounter you should be including in your overland travel is environmental encounters. What I mean by environmental encounters are hazards like quicksand, or weather like blizzards or tornadoes, and diseases like spongefoot, which my players in my last swamp campaign got. Environmental encounters present the opportunity for creative problem solving, which is one of the things that players love. It's one of the reasons why we play D&D other than any other game, is because it gives us the opportunity to be free thinkers and to come up with creative solutions to difficult and fantastic problems. So what I recommend doing for environmental encounters is we're going to go ahead and look at Out of the Abyss. We're going to go ahead and look at Out of the Abyss. So if you look in it, they have a whole section of fantastic environmental encounters, gorges and caverns and vents of poisonous gas, and all sorts of things that really make the Underdark feel like deadly, challenging terrain. It really makes the players feel like getting from point A to point B is harrowing. And this is something that we kind of want to invoke when we're traveling in the Underdark. If you're traveling in the desert, you could do other sorts of things. So what I'd recommend is thinking about where your adventure is going to take place. Let's say the desert, and then jot down 2 or 3 types of environmental encounters. Quicksand, shifting sand dunes, a sandstorm, running out of water that would possibly affect the characters. Oh, heat stroke, that's another good one. So there's all sorts of interesting, flavorful consequences that you can have in environmental encounters. Oh man, third one, best one, discovery encounters. I love the Elder Scrolls games. And one of my favorite parts is, you know what, I'm on a mission, I need to go to Whiterun, I need to get there, but then all of a sudden, on the corner of my map, I see a cave. Oh man, what's in there? There might be bandits, they might have loot, there might be more treasure, there might be an ancient spirit. I have to go explore. So this is something that I do a whole lot when doing overland travel. If you take a look at our old campaign map for the campaign if you take a look at the map for the campaign we just finished, only like 6 of these locations started out on the map. The rest of them the players discovered by rolling on a random encounter and getting a discovery encounter. These present meaningful choices to the players. Do we delay our main mission to go explore this cave? Do we get involved in this weird frog tribe village? And it also gives you the opportunity to present a more living world. I'll give you an example. If your characters walk by and have a discovery counter, they see a watchtower that's being built, they could choose to ignore it because they don't know what it is. But they come back maybe on the same path on the way back home, and now that watchtower's in ruins and fire. You've just given them a clue into another whole plot they would not otherwise be aware of. It also gives your players an opportunity to take a break. Sometimes pursuing the main quest, session after session, being carrot and sticked by the DM, can get a little irritating. So this gives them an opportunity to do something that would be like a one-shot. Something off the main quest, something to relieve some stress and just have fun. If you as the DM had an idea for a cool location or a one-shot adventure, something that you wanted to run, but you would not otherwise fit into your campaign, this is a great opportunity to get it in there and give your players the opportunity to explore it and make it feel natural. So what are other folks doing? I think back in February, Mike Merles released an unearthed arcana called Into the Wild, which I thought was just great. The basic premise was that you have a couple of different terrain features that are random percentages. So maybe if you're in the mountains, I think was his example, that there was a 15% chance of a huge crag, but there was always a 100% chance of at least 1d3 boulders. Another thing that he did was that different locations in those mountains would have different discovery DCs. Like if you were trying to navigate to a lost shrine, that would be a DC 15 check to get there. Or if you're trying to find the Cave of the Moon, that was pretty well known, that might be like a DC 10. If you were on the road, there was no DC. And I thought that was a really cool idea. It still presented some opportunities to explore and to have it still presented some opportunities to feel like you were actually discovering something and working towards getting to your location without it feeling like a grind that you see in a lot of overland travel. So other couple of videos they might want to watch, if you check out Nerdarchy's overland travel video, they keep talking about how overland travel is a great opportunity for roleplay. That your characters have a lot of free time, they can just talk to each other, there's not a lot of pressure, and it gives you an opportunity to build some interaction and some intrigue between your characters and some NPCs. If you look at my Monarch's video, her main advice is you come up with lots and lots of little narrative bits that have some consequences to them. Oh, some wild dogs come up, do we feed them or try to shoo them off? Oh, we meet some shepherds, do we protect their sheep or let the shepherds roam? Oh, the dogs come up while we're protecting the shepherds, what do we do? So she comes up with all these little bits that really add a lot of detail and a little bit of feeling of a mundane life while walking across the wilds. So this was my first video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I think next week I'm going to be talking about writing a one-shot adventure, and I'm going to find a new group of players to play with me. I'll let you know how that goes.